All right. Okay, so today's Chumash, very interesting, different, very different Chumash than what we usually have. Today is Wednesday, so there's just 3-4 portions left to the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shabbos is 4 portions left, and we're going to finish the Chumash. Why is today's Chumash different? Because there's some prophecy in it. And as very often, when there's prophecy, it could go different ways, and therefore it's unclear. So there's going to be some like poetry, some prophecy, and we really need to look in depth to understand the words, and therefore we're going to be trying to read in between the lines and what he's saying, and there's going to be maybe some different interpretations. It's also very fascinating because it's the father basically addressing his children and dealing with the issues that they had during their life, and the father rebuking the children that need to be rebuked, and even telling the children what kind of future they should have, like what kind of business they should go into, or how they should live based on their personalities and what's the healthiest part for these people. It's very, very interesting. So let's get started as we are learning together. We're holding today's Chumash to the very interesting section of the fourth section of Parshas Vayechi, the last parsha in the first book of the Chumash. So Vayikra Yaakov el banav. Yaakov calls his sons, right? He's ready to pass away. He's old and he's weak. His eyesight is going away. And he calls them together, Vayomer, and he says to them, and I discussed this verse at length in last night's class. He says, Heyasvu v'agida lachem, gather together and I will tell you, as asher yikra eschem b'achris hayomim, what will happen to you in the end of days. Come here, gather together, and I'm going to tell you what is going to happen in the end of days. And Rashi says, what does that mean? I'm going to tell you, my dear children, what's going to happen in the end of days. Rashi says he wanted to tell them when Mashiach is going to come. He wanted to tell them when Mashiach is going to come. And his divine prophecy was taken away from him. The Shekhinah was withdrew from him. So he started to say other things. And this is a long discussion last night of this very interesting Rashi. What does it mean? And that we're not going to get into now, but it's definitely a fascinating Rashi on its own right. He katzvu, so he changes topics. He says, he katzvu v'shimu b'nei Yaakov. He says, gather together and listen, sons of Yaakov, v'shimu Yisrael avicham, and listen to your father Israel. Listen to your father Yisrael. And he starts to go down the list, and there's going to be some beautiful lessons in life. Listen to the father talking to his sons and dealing with the different challenges, especially with Yosef and different challenges that they had throughout their life. And listen to the father guiding and kind of giving, like, his last will and testament to his children. So we start with Reuven. He says, Reuven b'chayriata. He says, Reuven, you are my firstborn son. Koichi v'reishis oini. You are my strength and my first might. Rashi says, very interesting, that Yaakov never had an emission. The first, right, as we were learning in our Tanya class, that's something that's not allowed. Yaakov was a great tzaddik. So until he had his first child, he never had an emission. This Reuven was literally the first energy, the first DNA of Yaakov that came out of him. So this is one of the reasons, again, why often like the firstborn son will get double portion. He's a father's first strength, the first energy. There's something special about him. He says, Yeser se'es v'yeser ois. He says, in truth, as being the firstborn son, as Torah dictates, you should get more than the rest of everybody else. You should get the kahuna. You should be the Kohen. Be the one to lift up your hands and pray, bless the community in the shul. It should have really gone to you. The Yeser Oiz, and you should be the king, like the strength of the family. You are the firstborn son. You should have filled that position. He says, but I need to tell you why you lost it. You're not going to get it. You should have really had the rights to it. You should have really been the first one. You're the firstborn child. You should have been the one that is blessed and has the tremendous honor and prestige over all his brothers. But what do you do wrong? And this is a very important lesson in life. And the thing is patience. Patience is probably one of the most right? It's a virtue worth acquiring. Patience is amazing. It's a different life you live if you have patience or if you don't have patience. So he says, Pachas kamayim al toisar. Again, it's very poetic, the way these words are all described by Yaakov. He says, you were restless, like the restlessness of water, like water just gushing and coming. You didn't think, you didn't have patience. And you got angry quickly. You weren't calm, cool, collected. The leader of the family needs to be someone who's calm, cool, collected. What did you do in your life that shows me that you're not fitting because of your impatience to be this honorary role and to fill this important position of the firstborn son? And lost everything that because of your lack of patience, you lost all these honors and prestige that were supposed to come. Ki alisa mishkevei avicha, because you ascended on your father's couch. What was the sin, the famous sin that we spoke about that Reuven did, is that when his mother's sister Rachel passed away, he was very offended for his mother's honor that Yaakov didn't move the bed to his other wife. Instead, he moved it to the maidservant of Rachel. And he moved his father's bed out of the tent where it was placed and moved it into his mother's tent. He went and started moving the furniture around. And Yaakov says, you should know there's a tremendous divine presence on top of my bed. So the intimacy of a tzaddik, right? This is the creation of the tribes that we're talking about over here, a tremendous energy and power. And because of your restlessness, you didn't think it through. You weren't relaxed. You weren't thoughtful and carried out. And you did this thing, and you're playing with fire, basically, right? You're playing with the third rail in the subway. This is what caused you to lose all this great honor and prestige that was supposed to come into you because you moved the couch of Yaakov's bed. And that was a very grave mistake that caused you to lose a great deal of what you're losing. So Reuven, his oldest son, he says, I'm very sorry. But again, I think this is a lesson in life. He's trying to tell him, the father's being honest with him. You know, it's like the heart-to-heart talk. When you want your kids to succeed in life, you got to tell them as it is so that they're able to succeed. And he tells them as it is. He says, Reuven, very difficult challenge that unfortunately made you lose. And this blessing that would have gone to you, that you should get double, is something that was taken away. And then he moved on to his next two children. And he's also going to give them strong admonishment, these next two. Also very, very tough words, tough love. I guess, you know, sometimes you got to say it as is. So, because you want the future to be good for them. But listen what he tells them. Their problem is anger, he's going to say. Shimon v'Levi. He says, my dear next two sons, my son Shimon and my son Levi. The next two sons born to Leah. Achim, you are brothers. You're brothers. Why are they brothers? Because there was a unique bond between these next two, more than the rest of the brothers. Kli chamas, you've stolen instruments. Mechereseyam are your weapons. You've stolen instruments. You haven't acted like a Jew, like the son of Yaakov. Who does that? Who goes and kills a whole town and takes weapons and avenges, even if something wrong was done? Who does that? That's not a Jewish way to act. And he says, Rashi says here, that Yaakov was holding them guilty for the pain and suffering of Yosef being sold. And Rashi makes a very interesting calculation. He says that he figured out who was the one that was responsible for selling Yosef. The Torah doesn't tell us, actually. If you look in the Torah, it says that when Yosef was approaching them, right, their father sent Yosef to Shechem to go see how the brothers were doing. And Yosef was approaching them, and they said, one man said to his brother, let's kill him. Who was it that said, let's kill him? So Rashi says, you can figure it out. It wasn't Reuven, remember, because Reuven was the one who said, don't kill him, put him in the pit. So it wasn't Reuven. Now, it wasn't, so that leaves Shimon and Levi next. Now, maybe it was Yehuda who was the fourth son. But if you remember, Yehuda said, let's sell him instead of killing him. Right? So definitely wasn't the oldest one, Reuven. Reuven wanted to go pull him out of the pit. That was his plan, the Torah tells us. It wasn't Yehuda. Now, it wasn't the sons of the maidservants, because as we know from elsewhere, Yosef was very close to the maidservant sons. He actually protected the maidservant sons from the other brothers. So it wasn't the maidservant sons. It wasn't Reuven. It wasn't Yehuda. And it wasn't the youngest brothers of Leah, because they would never talk in front of the oldest brothers. So Rashi figures out that it must have been Shimon and Levi who really ganged up, and it was their idea to kill Yosef originally. So here we have Shimon and Levi are constantly causing trouble. First, they go and they wipe out the city of Shechem after their sister their sister Dinah is raped. And now when Yosef comes, they sell him. So Yaakov is addressing his two children who were who did certain major issues in trouble. And he says, your gangster style way of life of settling a score by killing, by using the sword to kill and get your act done, that's not the Jewish way to act. You stole it. You stole it from my brother Esav. That's the way Esav acts. But this is not the Jewish style of the way we do things. So what are we going to do with you? Shimon and Levi, your brothers have stolen weaponry. That's how my next two children are acting. And he says there's going to be problems in history with the offsprings of these two kids. And he says, please, God, do me a favor. B'soidam al tovei nafshi. Don't mix me into these two kids' counsel. I don't want to be involved. Don't mix my honor into their assembly, their mixture, their group. Don't keep me out of it. What's going to happen? And we have those two specific stories that's going to happen from these two boys. Shimon's going to have a great-great-grandson who's going to challenge Moses, actually. How will Shimon's great-great-grandson challenge Moses? Because if you remember, the Midianite women will tempt the men, the Jewish men, to seduce them and get them to sin, Rashi says. And the men will fall for it. And one of them will fall hard. Who's going to fall hard? A man called Zimri. Zimri was the leader of the tribe of Shimon, this oldest son who had issues, younger age, that he wiped out. Shimon is the older one of the two. And by the way, they say Shimon was the main culprit, was the one who got Levi involved. Shimon was a leader, obviously was a person. He was the one who wanted to kill Yosef. He was the one who wanted to wipe out the city of Shechem. I think it says even more than Levi, even though they were both together in both these things, he was more than Levi. So Shimon's tribe is going to have issues down the road that the Midianite woman will entice the Jewish men, specifically the most honorable, the top 12 leaders of the tribes, the one in charge of Shimon, his name is Zimri, he'll get involved with it. And not just will he get involved with one of the Midianite women, he's going to use it against Moses. So when Moses comes out and says, God said you're not allowed to do this. You're destroying the Jewish people. You're bringing a terrible plague to the Jewish people. Many people are going to end up dying. You know what he told Moses? He says, Moses, who did you marry? You married also a non-Jewish girl, right? You left Egypt. You left the Jewish people. You went down to Midian, actually, and you married a girl from there. So what do you want? What do you have against my wife? What about your wife? I'm allowed to do what I'm doing. Look at yourself. Now, there's a very big difference between Moses' wife and Zimri and this person's wife, because Moses married the girl before the Torah was given. This story is now taking place after the Torah was given and only allowed to marry a woman that converted. So it's not the same. So Yaakov sees in his divine prophecy the story, and he says, God, don't mention my name. I know they're Shimon's great-great-great-grandchildren that is going to have these issues. Please don't involve me. And actually, when it lists the name of this guy, it says Zimri, the son of Salu, the son of the head of the Shimoni, and it doesn't say Yaakov. So Yaakov's name is not mentioned with the offspring of Shimon. And by the way, the same thing happens with Levi. How does we see this happening with Levi too? Because we know there's going to be a guy called Korach, who's one of the descendants of Levi, who's actually Moses' cousin, and he's also going to challenge Moses and want to overthrow him. He's going to want to be a Kohen, he's going to want to be the leader, and Yaakov sees these coming from these two people. So he says, don't mix my name into these people. Only in honorable situations, when the family is mentioned for an honorable situation, for other reasons, when they're priests and they're praying and they're serving the people as they should, then I want my name mentioned. But otherwise, don't bring me into these things. Say, please, my honor. Yaakov is praying for his honor. Rashi says that he should not get involved with these people. And then he says, why not? Let's finish the verse. Ki ba'apam hargu ish, because in their anger, they had an anger problem, basically he's saying. In the anger, they killed a man. They tried to kill Yosef. In their will, they wanted to, in their will, they wanted to bring up a bull, to destroy a bull. Yosef is considered like this powerful bull. So they wanted to kill, these two people together wanted to kill this powerful bull. And he curses their anger. Look in verse 7. Orurapam. May their anger be cursed. Orurapam. And it's very interesting to notice. This is kind of what we learned in Tanya the other day. When we're saying something's bad, remember we said that we don't hate, and King David said he hated things that are against God. He hates the bad in people, not the person themselves. So when a person's acting bad, he's letting his animal soul overtake him. He's still God's child, but he's a child that's acting bad. So when a child's misbehaving, you don't hate the kid, you hate the fact that the kid is acting bad, especially if it's your own kid. You don't hate your kid, but you can't stand it because you can't stand how your kid is behaving and not your kid yourself. So he says, Yaakov says, I'm cursing not you, but I'm cursing the anger. So here we have Ruvain, who has, Yaakov says, a patience. There's a problem with patience. And then we have Shimon and Levi, who he's saying that it should be cursed, the anger that's in these two people. And their anger, because it's harsh, it's destructive, it's dangerous. Anger is very destructive. So what am I going to do? What's my advice to my children who are dealing with this anger problem? And they're dangerous. They're dangerous for themselves. They're dangerous especially with each other, with Shimon and Levi together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split them up among all the tribes. I'm going to spread them out. They're not going to live together. The Rashi says very interesting. The Levi tribes, we know, they never got a section in Israel. They were divided amongst the 42 or 48 cities around Israel. So it's actually very interesting. Why are they there? To teach the Jewish people. But I guess if there's a lot of angry people together, it could be destructive. So not just is it a problem when Shimon and Levi hang out together, but it's a problem when their tribes are all together. So I'm going to spread them out and they're very successful on their own, in their own area. They're very successful, but when they all get together, it could be an issue. When you have anger issues, it could be a problem. The same thing is with the children of Shimon. What kind of business are they going to have? Very interesting. He says they're going to be teachers, they're going to be scribes, and they're going to be poor. And why am I going to make them poor and give them the skill to be scribes and give them the ability to be teachers? He says because scribes need to go around selling their wares. You can't have 10 scribes living in one area, right? Because then where are you going to buy from? I guess like competition or so on. They're going to make the scribes live all over. Put mezuzahs in this area and that area, whatever it is. And teachers, everywhere needs teachers. But you can't have all the teachers live in one area and all the kids live elsewhere. So these tribes are going to actually need to live and be spread out. And that will be the way that they're going to deal with the anger challenges that come with them living together. It could become dangerous and they could become dangerous. So here we have the first three and they're all getting admonishment, right? Reuven, the problem is that Yaakov says that you were impatient, and Shimon and Levi, you were angry. So Yehuda hears his older brothers coming to get a blessing from their father, and what do they get? They get it over the head. The Rashi says Yehuda didn't want to come. He's like, okay, I'm next. And he knows that he has his own package, right? Because we know the story with Tamar, right? That he ended up marrying his daughter-in-law, and that whole story with the woman who was a prostitute who looked like a prostitute at least, and that whole story. And all he needs is now his father's going to let it out on him. But his father goes 180 the other way, and he says, no, Yehuda, you're good, you're a special guy. And listen what he says, verse 8, Yehuda, ata yiducha achacha. He says, your brothers are going to acknowledge you. You're the special one. You're like the king in the family. Everyone's going to recognize the uniqueness that you have, Yehuda. Yadcha ba'oiref evecha. Your hand will be at the neck of your enemies. We know when is that going to happen? We all know that King David comes from this lineage. And Yosef and Yehuda and King David held their necks, like the verse says. God gave them the back of their necks. And your father's sons are going to bow to you. All your father's sons, right? Everyone, because it was in a bunch of mothers. So we said just the father and all the sons. The rest of your brothers are going to bow to you. He's going to be the king among the Jewish people. You, Yehuda, you're royalty. That's your personality, your royalty. He actually says that Yaakov thought originally that Yehuda was the one who sold Yosef. Why did Yaakov think that Yehuda was the one who sold Yosef? Because Yehuda had the most reason to sell Yosef, right? Like you follow, he had the most incentive. he was the most incentivized to sell Yosef because Yehuda personality was royalty. The main competition to him would be Yosef, who also had the sense of royalty. So Yaakov actually thought, mistakenly, that Yehuda was the instigator and the one who decided to sell Yosef. And he found out that that's not true. Yehuda was the one who actually tried saving Yosef. So we see this man who would be the greatest reason to want to sell Yosef was actually the one who was trying to save Yosef. The greatest threat to him was, right? You know, when the crime happens, you look, what's the motivation? Who has the motivation to commit the crime? And it was Yehuda, and that's why his father thought that perhaps it was Yehuda. But Yehuda was exactly the opposite. He had the greatest reason. Yosef was the greatest threat to Yehuda, and the opposite. Yehuda said, we should not kill him. Instead, we should sell him in order to save them from killing him because they were about to kill him. So he says that Yehuda, this guy, he's going to be the leader of all the brothers. And we see that this happens in the future, that obviously the king of Yehuda, he becomes king, and it's going to happen. And he describes, here he's prophesizing the future. And again, whenever there's a prophecy, it's a little bit unclear. So I'm going to explain to you how we translate this next verse, verse 9. He says, Gur Aryeh. He says, you're going to be a young lion in Yehuda. You're going to be a young lion. What does that mean, a young lion? We know at the beginning of King David's life, he's describing King David, who's going to come from this tribe. Because in the beginning, there was a different king. It was Saul. Saul was the king. And Yehuda was the warrior. He was in charge of the army, and he defended the Jewish people. So in the beginning of King David's life, King David was like a young lion. That's what the verse means. Miteref b'ni Alisa, from the prey of my son, you withdrew. And I'm going to explain this verse in a minute. Kara ravatz ka'aryeh. You crouched and you rested like a lion, and like an older lion, mi kimenu, who could wake you up. So eventually, as Rashi explains, what's going to happen is you're going to go from a young lion to be the full king, to be a young lion to a very powerful, strong lion. And then when Mashiach comes, you're going to lay down like a older lion who's going to be able to wake you up. In other words, that you were, and he's describing, Rashi says, the gift for Yehuda himself did. Very interesting. He said that, look, Yehuda, you were so special. You were the most threatened by Yosef, and instead of killing him, you saved him. You also saved Tamar, because when Tamar was pregnant, and you said kill her because she committed adultery, and when you found that it's your own kid, you embarrassed yourself by letting everybody know that it was really you. So you had two opportunities in life to kill someone to save your neck. And instead, what did you do? You threw yourself under the bus and you saved the other person. So that's the praise and quality of a king. That's the quality needed of a king. So far we have Reuven, the problem was patience. Shimon and Levi, the problem was anger. Yehuda, you made mistakes, but you've always put somebody else in front of yourself. And that is what makes you, and always protected someone else. That's what a Jewish king looks like. And that's royalty, and that's where you're going to go from here. So that's the beautiful praise that is giving his son Yehuda. He says, not just that. L'yasser shevet mi Yehuda. Never, ever the leadership will always stay by the tribe of Yehuda. They will be the leaders, even after the temple will be destroyed. And they're going to go into Babylonia, Rashi tells us. It's called a Reish Galusa, the head of the exile, will always be from the tribe of Yehuda. The dignity will always be there. By the way, just to mention, Rashi, as far as I know, Maimonides, great leaders of the Jewish people, even later on, were from the tribe of Yehuda. Some people say even the Rebbe was from the tribe of Yehuda. So he says that in the Babylonian exile, the leadership, not just the kings during the whole first temple period, but even the leadership of the Jews, when they'll be chased out of exile, will be, for many years, will be from the tribe of Yehuda. And the teachers, even later on, or even in Israel, where they won't be kings, like in Babylonia, they won't have that same Reish Galusa, the head of the exile power. They'll be the teachers of the Jewish people. The students will sit at their feet ad ki yaveh Shiloh, until Mashiach comes. Till Mashiach comes. And when Mashiach comes, the whole world will gather together to come to hear from Mashiach. They're all going to gather together. So here, literally, Yaakov is predicting the future, prophesizing what's going to take place and the power of this very special person who didn't have impatience, who didn't have anger, and instead was someone that put the person before himself and recognized and put his neck out, threw himself under the bus in order to save other people. And he continues to describe what's going to happen with the coming of Mashiach. And therefore, there are three interpretations, actually, on how to understand this next verse. So let me try to read them to you. Let me try to read it 1, 2, and 3. So let's just read the verse inside. Oisrei Gefen Iroi. This is how your land in Israel, right, where the tribe of Judah toward the south will be. We will tie to a grape tree, a grapevine. Iroi, a male donkey. One male donkey will be tied to a grape tree because there's going to be such good and so much grapes on this, so many grapes on this tree that it will load up a whole cart of one donkey just to carry just the grapes of one tree. And another kind of like a long vine, grapevine, a female donkey. So you're going to need so many animals just to move and transport the amazing wine. As we know today, Israel has a lot of amazing wine there from the mountains and so on. And kibes beyayin levusha, you're going to have so much wine that you'll wash your clothes in wine. It means like, not literally, you're not going to wash your clothes in wine, but you're going to have so much wine you can wash your clothes in wine. Ubedam anovim, with the blood of grapes, right? The redness of grapes, susai, you can wash your one way to say it is your clothing. It's another word to say clothing. So one is a beautiful blessing that you're going to have tremendously prosperous area with delicious wine in the tribe of where Yehuda is going to be. The next interpretation, another way to understand it, is it's talking about the coming of Mashiach. That the vine doesn't mean actually grapes. It's talking about the Jewish people, or it's talking about the tzaddikim, the righteous people. And he describes it like this. The Jewish people will be tied, iro, from the word city in Hebrew, to the city. Which city? To Jerusalem. The Jewish people will be tied to Jerusalem. And one way to translate this is, Bnei Asoini means the building, or building the temple. You're going to rebuild the temple. Or it could also another way talking about people that do mitzvahs. And they'll wear royalty and clothing, distinguished and royal clothing. Again, as I always say, when we talk about prophecy, it's a little bit more vague, and that's why there's room for a number of interpretations. A beautiful prophecy about the coming of Mashiach that's already predicted then. We're talking about 3,500 years ago about what's going to take place with the offspring and who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the one that's going to do all this. That's going to be the offspring and descendants of Yehuda. As I said, throughout our history, all the kings, there were many, many kings from King David during the first temple. The head of the exiles in Babylonia out of Israel, also from the tribe of Yehuda. There's some very famous stories called Bastanai and other stories that we have. And then we have also many great leaders throughout all of our history being from the tribe of Yehuda. Again, there's, I believe, two ways to understand verse 12. Again, it's prophetic, and there's two ways to say it. Either you could say, means red-eyed, which means your eyes will be red from wine, the ayin. You're going to have so much wine. You'll be, it's going to be a good life. It sounds like very wealthy, successful life. And your teeth will be white from milk. That's, again, why are these descriptions? So wine, which means you'll produce great fruit and grapes. And white teeth means that there'll be a lot of milk. Why is there going to be a lot of milk? Because the pasture in your area will be so rich, the animals will give off a lot of milk. Another way to read it is not that your eyes will be red, the mountains will be red. It's a little bit different way of reading it. Or another way of reading it is the wine will flow like rivers. Okay, so again, different ways of reading it. Again, describing the great produce and success of the land of where Yehuda is going to live. And that is the end of son number 4. So we have, again, Ruvain, patience, challenge, and lost the firstborn rights. Shimon and Levi, they were angry and they needed to be divided among the Jewish people. And then we have Yehuda, who's royalty and dignity and cares about somebody else, puts his own self down in order to help another person. Verse 13, let's move on, the next son. Zevulun will be businessmen, his father is telling them. They will be merchants, travelers. They'll be frequent flyers. They will live by the border, by the beach. They'll have like beachfront property. And they'll have where the boats dock and ship. And they will be on the border. The boundary will be by the place called Sidon. So they're going to be businessmen that will be merchants that will travel all over the world in order to do business. And that will be their profession. So out of all the 12 tribes, there's one of them that he kind of gives them the talent and success of being very successful businessmen. And what are they going to do with their success? They're going to support, Rashi tells us, the next brother, Yisachar. They're going to be very talented. Hashem will bless them with tremendous success in business. And with that business and the money they bring in, they're going to support this next brother who we're going to learn about here. So they basically had a partnership. One of them spent most of their time doing business, and the other one spent most of the time learning Torah. And the people in business supported the people in Torah, and the merit of the people learning Torah went towards the people who were supporting them. And this is still today. This is a lot of deals that people have today. Is some learn, some support Torah, and that is how we're successful. So Yisachar, who's Yisachar? Yisachar is the next son. Chamor, he'll be like a donkey. What does it mean like he'll be like? Why is his imagery the donkey? Garem roivitz bein mishpasayim, lying between the boundaries, which means he's mighty, he's powerful. A donkey is very strong bones, and he's able to carry very heavy packages. I guess especially for his size, he's very, very strong, tremendous, has that strength of carrying heavy loads. But what load is he carrying? So he's telling us he's not carrying produce, he's carrying Torah. So it's not an easy thing for someone to accept on themselves this heavy yoke of Torah. The commitment takes a tremendous commitment, and only the strength of a donkey like that we're describing of Yisachar has that patience and that aptitude and the mind and the ability to follow through and study the Torah the way it should be studied. And he says, like, a donkey doesn't need a special place to sleep and he all the time. No, the donkey sits down wherever it is, it lies down to rest, and it picks itself up and continues moving. And those are the people that sit in Torah. They work very hard, they sleep a little, and they work hard, and that is the way that they get Torah. So we have the description of Yisachar, and we have the description of their partner, who we call Zvulun. Zvulun was the businessmen, the merchants. They traveled and traveled. That was their talent, and Yisachar's talent was that they sat and learned Torah. Okay. Verse 15. Vayar menucha ki tov lo. He saw his resting place, that it was good. He saw that the land of where these people will eventually get in Israel when they leave Egypt, and they'll get there, they'll see that they'll have a very special land that gives good produce. So these people that are sitting there in Torah will have good quality growth in their land. The land is pleasant, and he'll bend his shoulders to carry the burden, because it's not easy to be this kind of scholar. I don't know, people think maybe you just sit and learn. It's not an easy thing to really commit to this. It's a challenging and tremendous commitment that's made. But when he makes this commitment, the Hilamas Oived, he will become a laborer for his, like, the taxes to his brothers, meaning that because of his labor, he's going to become the rabbinic opinion and help the rest of the Jewish people when they have questions in Jewish law. Because they're so studious and they're so committed to Torah, that will pay off, and they will be able to give guidance and Torah rulings and Torah understanding to the rest of his brothers. So they're going to become like rabbis and leaders and teachers to the rest of the Jewish people. They'll make the head court, like the Supreme Court will be from them, and so on, to guide the Jewish people. Okay, done. What about done? I believe this is the last one for today. Yeah, done is Yadin Amma. He will judge the people. Ke'achat Shifta Yisrael. He'll be similar to the tribe of the unique one of Israel, meaning Yehuda. So just like the tribe of Yehuda will be the king and royalty and fight the wars for the Jewish people, this tribe of Dan will also have similar idea like the tribe of Yehuda, that he will also defend the Jewish people. Where do we see this? Is a famous story in the Tanakh, in the Torah, with Samson, Shimshon. You know the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson will come from the tribe of Dan, and he will fight the Philistines who are constantly harassing the Jewish people, and he will stand up and he will fight for them against the Philistines before even the tribe of Yehuda will become king, before the Beis Hamikdash is built. He will do that. And defend the Jewish people. Yidan nachash ali darach. He says it'll be like a snake that's on the way. Shvifoin, that makes that, that sound. The snake ali oirach that you see, or a serpent or a viper, different kinds of snake. Hanoishach ikvesus, which will bite like snakes do the heel of the horse. It'll give him a bite. It'll throw the rider off the horse when he gets bitten. So the tribe of Dan, will also, as described there, attack the Philistines in that manner in order to defend and take care of the Jewish people. And he says, like, as Unkala says here, when a snake bites you, there's really no back, you can't go back. The poison attacks the person and it's very damaging. And Lishuascha Kavisi Hashem, however, for your salvation, I hope in you Hashem. What does that mean? What does that have to do with the tribe of Dan? If you know the story of Samson, is that Shimshon, at the end, the Philistines did get a hold of him after he caused tremendous havoc among the Philistines, because Delilah said the story of how he cut his hair and take away his strength. The last minute, they'll make a big party, the Philistines, and tie him up. And at the party, he'll pray to Hashem and says, God, please give me back my strength. Help me out at the last minute. And he will knock down the whole building. And I'll say this prayer, Yeshuascha Kivisi Hashem, for your salvation, I hope, O Lord. And this is what Yaakov is sensing and saying in his prophecy to his children about the future of what's going to come to all of them. So again, we have Ruvain, just to recap. Ruvain is the firstborn son who was impatient. And that was one of the big ideas that he mentioned there. Shimon and Levi were angry, and that's dangerous. And he blamed them for Yosef selling, all the suffering that happened because of that. In addition to, I actually think it's something interesting, and he's also blaming them for killing the city of Shechem. So Yosef says it's from Hashem, right? Everything that happened was from Hashem. But that doesn't mean the people who did it were still wrong. So Yaakov is saying, you're dangerous, Shimon and Levi, although this is all planned from God, but you were the ones who had the hand in it, who wanted to kill and sell Yosef, and therefore we need to take care of you, to have special jobs. Kind of, like when someone has too much time on their hands, we're going to make sure you're busy. So these two people, they can't live together. When they live together and together, it's dangerous what happens. Continuing on, Yehuda had the strength and courage to throw himself under the bus in order to save another person. Levi, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yisachar and Zvulun were the merchants. It even says the merchants first because they were the supporting of Torah. That's how Torah could exist. And Yisachar were the ones who sat on the Torah. Dan was the one who defended the Jews, just like the tribe, similar to the tribe of Yehuda. And that is the end of today's amazing class on Chumash. So we can make a little marketing thing. If anyone wants to do an end-of-year donation to support Torah, like many other places are doing, you can have the merit. Reach me after class, and we can do something like that. All right. Any questions? Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's what it is. Yisachar and Zvulun. That's the relationship as we're learning today. Any questions or comments on today's topic? What we learned. Any questions or comments on today's fascinating Chumash and prophecy that Yaakov was giving to the Jewish people? Yes, Mitchell, go ahead.
Just briefly, Levi later on, the tribe got a very special place. They were in front when they were carrying the Mishkan and all that to Israel. So did the prophecy change, or did they change their ways?
So they definitely, here's the interesting, so it's a good question. I was thinking about that. So here's how my mind is thinking to address that. Excellent question. So for 100%, let me say one point and then I'll get to the main point. One point is, it seems like more Shimon got blamed than Levi. Like Shimon was the instigator. Levi went along. I think I saw that in Rashi somewhere. I want to find it again, but Shimon was the main culprit of it, perhaps more than Levi, which might address part of the question. But Levi was an amazing tribe. The reason why Levi was the only tribe who wasn't part of the golden calf, never served in Egypt because they never got involved to begin with in Egypt. They stayed kind of like that Goshen lifestyle of just sitting and learning Torah. So their tribe was always unique. There's no question about it, right? So Levi I'm saying like, maybe they never, on one hand, maybe you could argue that they felt that Yosef was hurting the brothers. When we spoke about it, when they sold Yosef, remember we looked at commentaries, and they were defending their sister Dinah. I don't know if they were so bad. They were standing up for what they felt was right. Right? Moses is going to come from the tribe of Levi. And what's unique about Moses is that he stands up for the Jewish people. So I'm not sure that, first of all, I guess good could happen later on. I'm just thinking with you as we're discussing it. It doesn't mean you're how it is. First of all, it could also mean if you're all together, that's where the issues arise. You know what I mean? Like if people are all together in yeshiva, I didn't want to share this, but I think it's a good example. Someone said sometimes it's like fertilizer. He used to say. He says that fertilizer, when it's spread out along the ground, it helps grow the grass. But if you have a lot of fertilizer in one space, it makes it stink. It doesn't help. It's the opposite. So it could be it's too much talent in one place. It could also not end well. But I think there might be also some, maybe Levi's character, it's a great question. I'm just thinking out loud with you some ideas, was that if something bad happened, we got to do something about it. So he followed along Shimon, but that's a beautiful character too. So every negative has a positive. Everyone has their time and place where they're needed, wherever they are. So it doesn't mean anyone's perfect or anyone's imbalanced. Anyone's not okay, but I guess some people had stronger sense of certain abilities than others. So you could, I don't know that it's an interesting point that Levi, who here he's putting down, will eventually become the holiest tribe of all the tribes. But I don't know. Yeah, some of the points on that idea. So I'm just mentioning, it might have been Shimon was more of the instigator. Maybe they did change. Levi definitely was a very, very holy tribe, the holiest of tribes. Seemingly, which is why they got the honor that they received of being the Kohanim, and the Leviim will come from them. So why is it that he was involved at this stage? I'm just thinking of a theory. I don't know. I'm saying could be, we know about Moses that they were the kind of people that if something was bad, they had to do something about it, right? A lot of people in life just sit back and do nothing, and they felt they had to do something about it. So maybe that's connection to how they acted with Dinah and Yosef, and over here. I don't know, it's a good question. It's just some thoughts on that. Great question. That's just some thoughts on that idea. Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions or comments that we on today's interesting Chumash? No? Everybody good? All right. Let us move on to Tanya. So it's a long Chumash today, but it is a short Tanya. Okay. Today's Tanya, we're discussing the in-betweener, the Meinoni. And we discussed it at length yesterday. Who is this in-between person? And we said the first thing about him is that, and it's going to say it very clearly in today's Tanya, is that God created human beings that they could just say no, that they're in control, that way Hashem made us, it's not something you have to learn. You're hardwired, factory created by God, that your brain controls your heart. And that's the nature, that's an inborn nature in every human being, unless maybe they have a medical condition or so on, but we all can control, we're in charge of our actions, and we can control ourselves. So let's continue in today's Tanya. The problem with the Beinoni is, or the benefit, is that that he even though the animal part of him wants to literally use the body for its selfish, gluttonous things that hide God from this world, the fact is he doesn't have the keys to the car. He doesn't have control. God set up, right? A good example is I guess Congress, Senate, and the president, that they can't just do whatever they want. So, it might be like those three. So, you're very afraid, in a way, if all three have the same power, they're all in the same team, it could be very dangerous. So there's other people involved that have a say, that also have control. So the animal soul doesn't, as much as he wants to use the body to hide God, to not be translucent, to be selfish, to be gluttonous, and use the machshava dibur ma'aseh, the thought, the speech, and the action for all his selfish indulgence. But he's not the sole one in charge. He's not the king. He's not the only person in charge of the city, right? It's exactly the United States. He's not the only one in charge. It's not Congress is the only one in charge of the United States. They need the president to sign off on getting a bill passed. As much as they want to, they can't. They have the strong urge and desire, and they really want to do something, but they can't bring it out to reality. To dress it in the limbs of the body. I actually heard an interesting example, just because we're describing the animal soul. It's all about self-preservation. So I heard someone say an example yesterday. That's the same thing in politics. Once, I don't know if this is true across the board, but it was an interesting example. Once the politician gets into politics, all he cares about is staying in the seat, right? All the person could care about is self-preservation. So that's the one-track minded. So that's exactly it. So that, let's say they're hired, and Congress or the Senate or the president, all they're thinking about now is, how can I preserve myself? How can I continue to hold the power that I have? I don't want to lose my power. But the thing is, they're not in charge. There's other people that are in charge. So they can't bring it to b'machshava dibur ma'aseh, mamish. You can't bring it into the body, in the thought, speech, and action of the body. And even his mind has control that I don't want to think about this topic. I don't, even though the heart is sending messages to the mind and saying, think about it, think about it, think about it, be scared of it, like be lustful, want to do it, the mind can just shut it down every single time and not allow those thoughts to be in his mind. I'm not thinking about it, Like Mitchell brought an example, I'm scared of the elevator or whatever it is, you're on a plane and you're scared of turbulence. I'm not thinking about it. I'm moving on. I have the ability to control what it is that I'm going to think about and what I'm not, and I'm not going to think about it. Why? And here's one of the biggest points. The way God created the person is that the mind controls the heart. By its very nature of the creation of the heart, of the body, is that Hashem made it that the mind could control the heart. So your heart, you could be ADD, and it could be sending messages of the whole time, emotional messages. Think about it, but you can play ping pong and knock the ball away every time it wants you to think about it. You can move it away. Because that is how Hashem created the person. That's the form of man. That's the description of how man is created. That's reality. Every person can restrain himself and control the drives of his heart. To stop and not allow it to enter thought, speech, and action. And to switch 180 on what it wants you to think. So he's sending impulses and drives. Think about this, do this, speak about this, do this. There's a good piece of gossip. Go share it. No, I'm not going to share it. Hashem made it. I don't have to listen to you. So naturally, what he wants to say is that it's human nature. That's his main point now. It's not something you have to learn and discover. Every single human being has it on anything they want. And actually, the heart wants you to be angry at the person, and you have the ability to actually do exactly the opposite of what the animal soul is telling you to do. You could actually you could think about why to like the person. So he's telling you think about why to hate him. You could say, no, not just I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to do exactly the opposite. Because you have full control of the thought, speech, and that. You might not have control. You might not be able to say, I don't want to have ADD. I don't know, ADD might be a medical problem, so it might not be a good example. But you might not be able to control the fact that you want to think about certain things. That you can't control. But you could control if to think about it or not. You can't control the impulses you're getting to think about it or to want certain things or do certain things, but you could control if you want to act in it or not. Befrat, especially, listen, you could do that in any area of life, but especially when we're talking about with holiness, so tzaddik kedusha, with holiness. Why should you have an easier time fending off unholiness and protecting holiness? He says, look, because the bottom line is, at the end of the day, holiness has the upper hand over unholiness. They always have the upper hand. We see, he says, like King Solomon, he says, I see that wisdom has the upper hand over silliness. So I guess even in, maybe in the news sometimes there are silliness, or people are trying to convince you of silliness. Maybe, like with the world today, they're trying to say Israel's aggressive to the Arabs, whatever, and so on. So he says, wisdom will always win. Will always win. If you make sense and you're logical, you always have the upper hand. It's easier to defend that than the people that are trying to push the silliness. It's harder to defend. Just like light, it pushes away darkness. So he says, look, in a room, when you light a candle, a little bit of light, you have a little tiny candle, pushes away all the darkness in the room. I guess especially with like these LED bulbs today, you buy a little bright sunlight bulb and it lights up a whole big room. So he says why is that? Why is that? It's because light is more powerful than darkness. So here you are in the body trying to defend what? The guy, they're in the boxing match. But they're very different, the two boxers, one to another. One is light and one is darkness. So goodness, he's trying to tell you this is a very real thing in life. I guess we talk about a lot of the struggles in life, the darkness in the world. But he's trying to tell you that goodness, even though they're both in a huge fight against each other and it's a war over the city, the goodness and the light will always overcome the darkness. It's easier when you're on the side. The teams that are playing against each other, you want to be the one. You could control your mind either way. You have the ability, and you could make darkness win. You could. It's totally up to you. But it's being that you're defending holiness, which is the light, and the wisdom, you have the upper hand. So if you have a guy that talks seichel, that's smart, intelligent, and he shares intelligent ideas, there could be many other opposite ideas, but when that light, the clarity hits the room, it's able to melt the hearts of all the unclarity that's there. Pirush meaning, just like light is superior, it's more powerful, and it's dominion over darkness, right? The light, you turn on the light, and right away all the darkness leaves the room. A little bit of physical light pushes away a lot of darkness. It doesn't have to fight him even, the light just disappears. You see, like, this is what's beautiful about it. The darkness is really nothing. The light is substantial. The darkness is actually, it looks like it's huge and substantial, but it's nothing. So too with silliness and wisdom. Silliness is foolishness. With a little bit of clarity and wisdom, you can in 1 minute bring clarity to a very foolish situation. And that's what's going on inside the person. So the two that are up against each other, you could always control it, but especially when you're the one controlling who wins, the light or the dark. Like the rabbis say, who sins? People who are acting foolish. People that are sinning is because they are foolish. They're really literally acting like foolish people. So I'll give you an example. Like, a good example of this maybe might be, when do we lose ourselves? When we're tired. When we're not in the right state of mind. Because when we're healthy, when does someone get off a diet? When they're in a bad mood, when they're tired and hungry, they're not in a right state of mind. So the times we fall in life is because we're literally acting foolish. But had we worked with clarity, you would have never said to the person what you said. Had you slept and been in a good state of mind, you would have never said it, because obviously that's not the right thing to say. Because it's so clear that when you have the wisdom and the godly soul is standing on the side, you must have been out of touch with reality in order to do what you did or say what you said. You weren't yourself. Had you been yourself, you would have for sure been able to control it, because it's a no-brainer. It's so obvious to choose light over darkness. The godly soul wants you to just use it. Speak things that are good, and think things that are good, and act on things that are good. And if you're not, it must be something wrong. You must have been in a funny state in order not to act on it. Which are the 613 mitzvahs. So obviously, you always want to do good. And if someone doesn't want to, and they're allowing the animal soul to win, it must be that they're in a kind of crippled, unhealthy state, and they're acting foolishly, and that's the only reason why they're doing what they're doing. So again, his point is that the Benoni has control, and he's able to choose. It's in his nature. Done deal. You have that ability to decide who wins, even if all the cards are on the table are equal. Any situation in life, you could choose what you're going to do. But, however, especially in this situation where we're talking about light and darkness, you're able to break through with a clarity because the darkness is fake and it's foolish, right? You have a little bit of real news. When you have a lot of fake news, the real news could push over a lot of fake news away. It's actually just reminding me, this is exactly what the Rebbe told Bibi Netanyahu when he went to the UN. He was a young man. The president of Israel now was I could actually play it for you. It's a very beautiful clip. You'll probably get it. I should probably do that, but just tell you what he says. He said that the Rebbe, Bibi said this in the UN. Crazy. Bibi said this in the UN. He said what the Rebbe told him. The Rebbe said I believe it was Simchas Torah, and Israelis don't have to keep 2 days holidays. So Simchas Torah in America, a lot of Israelis who live in Israel are just here visiting for a little bit and not keeping the holiday anymore. And he went to 770. In the middle of the dancing of the Akafas on Simchas Torah, he met with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, you're going to a house of lies. House of lies, describing the UN. And Bibi said this in the UN. He says, the Rebbe told me that I'm going to a house of lies. He tells everybody in the UN. And he says, but the Rebbe told me, no matter how dark it is, a little bit of light could push away a lot of darkness. So here you have so much lies built upon lies, built upon lies. But the Rebbe told him, just speak clearly, shed a little bit of light, and it's unbelievable the change that a little bit of light could push it away. So you have, what the Tanya is trying to say is that you have full control, especially when you're trying to protect goodness, because goodness will always easily overcome and prevail darkness, because darkness is just darkness. It's nothing. It's just foolishness. And light is real light. And for sure, the Beinoni should be able to make sure that the godly soul wins. Any questions or comments? Or do you guys want me to play that video for you? Go for the any questions or comments before we go to that on what we learned, or it's clear?
I do.
Yes. Leah, go ahead, please.
So are people born, like Rasha, Tzaddik, Benoni, can they move between? Is it just that you're set for life? Like what you are is what you are?
Hold on. I'm just looking for the video. 1 second, sorry.
You're fine.
1 second. UN, a little, or maybe do UN, Lubavitcher Rebbe. So it's actually an excellent question. It's actually an excellent question. Probably everyone has that question. So what are we born with? And here's what you are born with, just in short. You are born with the kind of animal soul that God chose to give you. So you are born with what kind of tendencies your heart will push to your mind, what kind of lusts will be pushed into your mind. That you're born with by God decided what kind of challenges you'll have. But you are totally able to control if you act on it or not. So God will tailor for you your animal soul that you need. He'll also tailor for you the godly soul you need. So depending on, remember we said it's like pregnancy, which 9 months the baby's formed, the godly soul comes down through a whole evolution of levels till it goes into you, and that will dictate what kind of godly soul you'll have. And also the same thing with the animal soul, the unique, it could be, we said there's 4 elements. It could be more lustful, more depressed, depending on the nature of the 4 elements of the animal soul. That you don't choose. But the point in Tanya now is that how you act and your thought, speech, and action, you are 100% in the driver's seat and get to decide what ends up happening. So what kind of urges I have, I didn't decide that. God made me like that. But if I act on those urges or not, I have 100% control. Make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, so we are in a way created without being asked about certain things, but how we actually act is actually totally up to us. Now, yes, and the answer is the more you can elevate your your animal soul. And that's what we're learning. You could, the Beinoni's first line of defense is just simply discipline and self-control. But then we also learned that we could go more towards tzaddik. Yeah, we could tame and train just like an animal. You could tame and train the animal. You could tame and train the animal soul and get it. You could even, if you're great enough, we learned you could even make it into a tzaddik. But yes, 100%, depending on everyone's level, they could tame and train themselves. I guess it's like the alcoholic, you know, he might have a crazy urge, but he could slowly, as time goes on, you know, rehabilitate himself somewhat at least and change over time. It's not easy because that's how we're created with that animal soul, but we are able to change it somewhat. Very good question, Lisa. Yeah, makes sense? Any other questions? Yes, Ira.
This goes back to yesterday or a couple of days ago. Someone mentioned about Israel going to war and
joining the IDF. They said it was the animal soul. They said, no, that's the godly soul. It's not the animal soul.
Okay, so my question is, back in the day when you had the tribes fighting against each other.
Yeah, good. That's a very good example.
Those are two godly souls fighting against.
No, one right. That's like my kids fighting with each other. When my kids are fighting with each other,
there's one right and one's wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, that usually, I want to tell you something. I was learning this the other day. What's senseless hate? What's senseless hate? I realized that it's not that I care that I should have. I want you not to have. And this happens all the time in life. And a lot of times people will hurt themselves just so the other person shouldn't have. So the animal soul is jealous of the other person. And he'll knock him down. What will that, you know, he'll bite him, he'll kick him. What will the animal do? So when you have, very often what's fighting, there are two animal souls that are fighting each other. When people are getting in a fight. So guys in shul, one guy got offended. Someone dishonored him. He didn't say hi to him and now he's offended, or he said something mean. What's offended? Why did you say that? It was the animal soul said, why are you offended? It's the animal soul. So usually often in fights, what's going on here, it's really the two animal souls that are having a fight with each other. Often is the case.
So you said it was a godly soul because it was the IDF protecting Israel?
No, so she said what she was saying is when you go, sometimes the God animal soul is good. She said what her point was, because when you go to war, it's aggressive, it's fighting, and that's the IDF soldier, she said, uses his animal soul out. She said that's the want to go to war is the animal soul. So I said, no, I don't think so. I would say the want to defend your people is actually the godly soul, is not the animal soul. It's not, it could be coming.
When you have like two tribes like fighting each other.
So I'm saying that I look at the two tribes fighting each other like two kids fighting each other, and that's not coming from the godly soul probably. Most of the time, it's two animal souls fighting each other. And the animal souls get so caught up. What?
Neither one is right, it's just more emotional.
Correct. Often it's coming from emotion. It's not coming from a godly place. Usually when two people are fighting, it's not coming from a godly place. It's coming from often. I'm not like, a lot of times it's coming from an animal place. And what I think also is, I was thinking about this, my animal will wake up your animal. So let's say, because you know, like everything rubs off on the other person. So this is just my idea, but it makes sense to me. Let's say I'm acting like an animal in your presence. I'm going to awaken your animal. So let's say I'm selfish. I'll give my kids. They want to grab the last wafer in the bucket. You know what's going to happen? The other kid's also going to want to grab the last wafer, and they feed off each other. So, like, let's say I tell some of my kids, like, one of them will act. What happens is that someone is abusive. Abusive is a strong word. Someone was abusive to them, so then they'll be abusive to their younger sibling. So I'll tell them is to say, like, and then that sibling will be abusive to the other. Like you say, the parent was abusive to the child, so the child will then be abusive to their child. That's how they grew up. So you're having animals basically learning how to act from other animals. And it awakens the animal actually in the other person, I would say. I didn't say that. It was just my mind thinking.
Well, it's interesting because when you say the Shemona Esrei at the end, you say, God, guard my tongue or speak badly.
Yeah, from speaking evil, yeah.
So that's kind of like if someone said something to you as an animal, like that you shouldn't respond and elevate it.
Right. But by the way, I was thinking about that, is that, and maybe that's like a little bit of light chases away a lot of darkness. So I think like you learn from your surroundings. So people act like mean their animal soul's in control of them, it kind of wakens up and bothers the animal soul of the person next to them. So you have to have discipline. You kind of have to have discipline, not just to stand up against your animal. In other words, your animal gets woken up by that guy's animal. So you have to control yourself. Say, look, that guy's acting like an animal. That's what I tell my kids. It was wrong. I like my kid will come home and be abusive to the younger, mean to the younger one. I'm pretty sure in something happened before that someone else did it to him. And I'll say, look, I think you picked it up outside the house. Please don't continue this here. But if they do, then the sibling under that will continue with the next sibling. So what you have is people acting like animals. Now we're learning, don't learn from that. The opposite, look at the animal, identify the animal that's acting selfish and say, I'm learning not to be like you. I don't want to be like you. And what we're saying today is that when someone acts like an animal and you respond with a godly soul, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. So it's fake news. Like, maybe that's a good word to say. It's not real. The whole thing's fake to begin with. It's not true. It's all built on a lie. And when you bring in the clarity and the light, it dissipates it very quickly. Because the darkness in the room is not real. It's not a real thing that you have to fight. The boxing match is really, the other side is really fake. He's tired. He looks big and huge, but he's tired and he's beat up. He can't really fight. But the problem is you need to confront him. This is a lot of times in life. It looks huge. It looks tremendous. It looks so dark. But when you confront it, it'll disappear. So fake things need to be confronted, and when they're confronted, they disappear so quickly because they're not even real to begin with. That's what one of the things in Tanya today is saying. You have to stand up to the animal and reveal the godly soul. But I like a point you made. I thought it was like, yeah, animals are feeding off each other. Basically, this is my own idea. I don't know if it's true or not, but like you have somebody in the house in the group, like acting like an animal. You all have to be very careful not to fall into the trap that the person's setting and then continue to respond. And then, because now you're acting like an animal too, right? If you're responding, you're acting like an animal also. And you're caught up now in the trap. Yeah, Mitchell.
I was just going to say that also the opposite is true. I think that when somebody acts from their godly soul, when you're a good friend to somebody and they're a good person, that's when a good friendship develops, because you're pushing for each other's success. Their success is your success. So that the opposite, I think, is true also from the animal soul, which is the bad. I think the good can come out because when you're treating someone else well, they tend to treat you well back.
Right. You're right. You're 100% right. But he's not, I would say more than that. When you model the godly soul, the other person will learn to model the godly soul too. So I'll give an example, a teacher and a student. So everyone has the animal and the godly soul in them. Everyone has it. And there's different people who go around, and some people are garbage men. Like I like to say sometimes, I heard an example once. They always find they can always find the animal soul in the other person. And some people are the opposite. They always find the godly soul in the opposite person. So some people can find the animal soul, and some people are good at finding the godly soul. So it's like a teacher finds a talent by a child. Certain teachers are very special. They find the talent and they bring it out, and the kid grows up and does that for a living later on down their life because the teacher found the talent within them. So I guess that's our job too, we all have an animal soul, we all have a godly soul. So when you see the other person and you awaken the godly soul in them, you model it, and they learn. It's not correct. So they're responding to your godly soul. Correct. So you're right. So they're responding to your godly soul. I want to say even more. You're teaching them how to then. So when a parent gives tzedakah, they're teaching the child to give, right? When they're teaching the child to give, now the kid is giving too. So you're basically teaching your child that the godly soul should be in charge, and they're continuing to perpetuate whatever the way you're teaching them. Correct. So but I'm saying you see too often, one person gets angry, right away the other person gets angry. It's because the animal soul is there and ready by the other person. And by you acting like an animal, you're waking up the animal in the other person. Like, well, I have an animal too, not just you. So I have a bigger animal than you, so you got to be careful sometimes, because the other person's animal might be bigger than your animal. So your little animal wakens up that animal, you're in trouble.
Right. And I think, again, back to what I said, I think that's why in the Shemona Esrei, they say that at the end to guard your tongue, so that someone says something to you, not to react to it.
Correct. Because now you're acting like an animal too.
Right, because then you're escalating it, and then it just, it's
You're not just getting them back. You got in touch with your animal, right? Yeah, it's very true.
But it's interesting that
You're hurting yourself. You're making your animal soul.
right.
Who you're hurting by responding in kind to that person. You're hurting yourself because now your animal soul is in control of your body.
Right, but it's interesting because you're supposed 3 times a day, so it's something that's hard to control. That you have to
100%. Right. You need to be reminded of it constantly.
Right.
You need to be reminded. Don't fall into the trap. Don't respond in kind to the animal. That's guy's animals in control of his body. Don't respond in kind. Beautiful. Yeah, Ira, very good. Thank you. Excellent. Hey, Al, you want to say something? What? Sorry, Ira, what?
If you offer a class 24/7, we should have no issues because we'll just be in Zoom all day long, 7 days a week, and there will be no problem.
We could be like Yisachar. We could be like, let me tell you, it's not easy. It's also not easy doing this 24 hours a day. But you're right. I'm saying, remember we learned this yesterday, that when the Beinoni is davening and learning, you're not right now. Our godly soul is really in our bodies. I guess that's what we do this hour every day. We put our godly soul in the driver's seat, and most of us on the class are not thinking about jealousy or want to hurt people because our godly soul is in charge of our body for this hour, right?
Right. The only problem with if you do it 24/7, you're gonna have to get another group of people to support all of us. That's the whole
Correct. Thing. I don't know. By the way, it's like everyone says, oh, a lot of people would rather do the business than the sitting and learning for so many hours a day, like in their tendency. They don't have the patience and ability. Like, you know what? Let me make the money. I know what I'm doing. I'm enjoying hustling, and I like doing the business end. You sit and learn. I bet you most people would choose that option over the other option. Hashem should bless them. They should be very successful in business and support the other guy who's sitting and learning. But anyway, yeah. We need the relationship. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You need to have from both sides. Yeah. I think Ayal wants to say something.
I just for what Mitchell said and then what Ira said. It's King Solomon wrote it most beautifully. He said, "Kamayim apanim lapanim ken leva adam laadam," which means back in the day they used water to see the reflection. It was like a mirror. Yes. And King Solomon says it's like a person looking in the water. That's how the soul is reflecting on another person's soul. So if you be nice to somebody, it's the best described is if you walk in the street and smile to somebody, total stranger, they'll smile back at you.
Yeah.
If you show a frown, they'll show a frown. Now,
it's very interesting. Yeah.
To the tribal war that Ira spoke about, I think there's a little bit of difference because the tribal wars are actually sinat chinam, like you said. It's just a hatred that is unnecessary. And the end goal is not to annihilate your opponent, it's just to hurt your opponent in a certain aspect of their life. You don't want to annihilate them completely. The war in Israel is, I want to annihilate you for being Jewish. So the end game or the end goal of the wars is a little bit different, which changed the dynamics of this is a holy war because it's a religious war. This is the divine soul fighting a war, or it is the animalistic soul that's fighting just to hurt somebody for the sake of hurting somebody. And that's the difference between the tribes. That's why the temple was destroyed, because sinat chinam, because the Jewish people were not united, and that's why it was destroyed. If the Jewish people were united and there was avat chinam, then the temple would have never been destroyed.
Yeah, just you reminded me of what you're saying. I'm saying is like the goal in another person is to awaken their godly souls. So any way you could do it, you don't always have, like when you turn, I'm understanding this idea finally, like that I always speak about, but sometimes you really like, it's making me understand it. So it's the whole idea with darkness is like the best way to fight darkness, especially what we're learning, is not by going down to its level. You know what I mean? Waking up your animal soul and fighting him is just turn on the light. It's saying that because it's not even real. So when the other person, when their animal soul's in control, what's the best way to help them? Like that's why I think maybe that's why the campaign of putting on tefillin. It's like, forget about it. I'm not getting to your life. I'm not getting everything. Just turning on the light. When you put on tefillin, you're going into that state of like, boom, your godly soul's in charge of your body. And that's all I need to do because that's real and everything else is fake. So I'm not going to get, if my animal soul with you will need a fight, we'll have to have a boxing match. I'm not doing that. I'm just turning on the light. I just need to get you in touch with your godly soul. My godly soul needs to get you in touch with your godly soul, and that changes everything. We just need to turn on the light.
Right. They say like if you're in an argument with someone or someone, if you give them a hug, it like changes the whole mood.
Exactly.
No,
by the way, a lot of times the argument is not even what the argument's about. So in other words, something else is really bothering the person, right. And it's, in other words, the ego, the animal is hurt, and they're screaming at something else. So you're exactly, that's perfect. Give them a hug. It's like turning on the light. It's not, you're caught up in your animal. The more I'm going to fight with you, the more your animal's going to get stronger. The more my animal's going to get stronger. The more we're going to attack each other. We're both going to draw the lines and get more in touch with our animal. But if we could just flip to the godly soul, which we all have the control to do in a second, that will change everything. Like it's so powerful. It's so interesting that there are people like they're anti-religious sometimes, and then they just do a mitzvah and they break down and it's over because it's just that shield that they have up protecting themselves. Their animal soul has up. And once you've gotten past the rough exterior, there's nothing there. It's not even real. They love it. They love Judaism and so on, but it's just fake. It's not even real. And you just need to get them in touch with their godly soul. Beautiful ways. So powerful, this class. I'm really understanding it. Sorry, Ira, what are you saying?
No, the speaker that you had, I forget his name, Tanya, what was it, Rabbi?
Chase Taub.
Right. He told a story about there was a rabbi that works with the police on the bridge.
Yeah. If one person would have just said hi to that other person.
Right. So what the rabbi does is when so many people commit suicide is they go to the house to look for the letter and find out why. And this guy lived maybe, let's say, 2 miles away from the bridge. And on his suicide note, he goes, I'm going to commit suicide on the bridge. All I need is for someone to say hi to me and I'll turn around and come home. And no one said hi or even smile or anything. And he ended up committing suicide. So that's
his message was, you never know what you could do. Like you
right.
never know the power you have. But you're saying like by everyone, it's like by smiling and making happy, you're basically getting the guy in touch with his godly soul, right. And who knows what's going to happen after that. All you have to do is get him in line with his godly soul, and who knows what's going to happen after that. All right, let's share this clip. I think it's time. There's a few clips. So I'm not sure which. There's all these different kinds of things, but I see one is just, hold on one second. It's just 1 minute.
The truth.
Hold on one second. There's all these kind of websites. Here, this might be it. It's a little bit longer. It's the same one.
Well, here's what's happening now, right now, today. Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon now presides over the UN Security Council. This means, in effect, that a terror organization presides over the body entrusted with guaranteeing the world's security. You couldn't make this thing up. So here in the UN, automatic majorities can decide anything. They can decide that the sun sets in the west or rises in the west. I think the first has already been preordained. They can also decide, they have decided, that the Western Wall in Jerusalem, Judaism's holiest place, is occupied Palestinian territory. And yet, even here, in the General Assembly, the truth can sometimes break through. In 1984, when I was appointed Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, I visited the great rabbi of Lubavitch. He said to me, and ladies and gentlemen, I don't want any of you to be offended because from personal experience,
it's crazy that I just want to mention this is in the UN in front of everyone. He quotes the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's quoting the Tanya we learned today. It's unbelievable.
Experience of serving here. I know there are many honorable men and women, many capable and decent people serving their nations here. But here's what the Rebbe said to me. He said to me, you'll be serving in a house of many lies. And then he said, remember that even in the darkest place, the light of a single candle can be seen far and wide. Today, I hope that the light of truth will shine, if only for a few minutes, in a hall that for too long has been a place of darkness for my country. So as Israel's Prime Minister, I didn't come here to win applause. I came here to speak the truth.
Isn't that amazing? So there you go. That was today's Tanya. That was exactly today's Tanya. He's telling you that the UN is built. There's so much power against you. There's so much lies. And Tanya said, first of all, you have the ability to choose, even if it's both lies. But especially, this is the truth, and that's the lie. And darkness is just nothing. That's really what it is. And if you have wisdom amongst darkness, in a minute, it could change everything. In a minute, it could change everything. You have the whole UN voting against you, but you say the Rebbe told him, don't be scared of it. Darkness is fake. It's huge and it's humongous but it's all built on lies, and therefore it's fake news. And therefore, in a second, you bring out the truth, and everything can change. By the way, that's crazy. At the UN thing, he's quoting the Rebbe there, which is just unbelievable on its own. He said, the Rebbe told me, this is into everyone. He tells them in their face, this is a house of lies. The Rebbe told me, don't be offended. There are some good people here, but it's a house of lies. Unbelievable. All right, and that's today's Tanya. All right, I think a good place to leave it at. Thank you all for joining me.